Okay. We are. Somebody is feeding back. Okay. All right. I think we'll be all right. Probably. Anyway, everybody mute.
I think that's from the recording source.
I'm going to stop this recording here. Aha. Good. Well, welcome everybody. We're going to have a session on thermaling here. It was stimulated by the fact that after Mitch's report to the general meeting, we found that there were a lot of flights that were short when some flights were long. When some of the privately owned ships or other more highly experienced members were staying up until they got called back down, and then the others were squeaking out 0.3 of an hour. So we thought we should do something about it. And just let me relate my personal experience briefly. When I got dragged into glider flying after years and years and years of flying airplanes, I routinely had to work hard to not beat the tow plane down. But our instructor, who was in the early throes of Alzheimer's disease, didn't teach us anything about thermaling at all. We tried to figure it out from the books, but the more books you read, the more confused you get. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I'm going back to flying airplanes. On my second solo, somehow a thermal got me dragged up in a 222, which is the grandfather of the 233, to cloud base at 6,000 feet. I was circling around in a domed cumulus with 6 buzzards. I thought, this is pretty cool. And then everything started going gray, and I figured I better get out of here. And I did. And shortly thereafter, I was back out on the ground trying to figure out how I got there. Our book, the only book we had, was The Joy of Soaring by Carl Conway. It's a classic, and it's still a good book. But it really didn't help me much. And I didn't find much joy in soaring until I hit that thermal. After that, I said, I got to learn how to do this, and I got to do it a lot more. So the joy comes from being able to soar. And if you're having trouble soaring, you don't get a lot of joy out of it. So we're going to start with a kind of an overview and a strategic approach. So Scott's going to get us started. Preparation is everything. Just like painting or welding, bad preparation, bad results. And that's totally true of soaring too. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? You practice, practice, practice. You have to get to the point where you can fly the glider without thinking about it. It just does what you want it to do. And so you get to the point where you can fly accurately on autopilot. And Scott's going to get us started on how to go about that. So Scott, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Hartley. Before I get going, I'd like to recognize 4 prospective new members that we have with us tonight. Edward Reyes, raise your hand there, Ed, if you would. And we've got Jeff Mueller, Terry Cusack, and Gil Patton and his son are all sitting in. So it's a nice turnout for prospective members that haven't started flying yet, but we have plans for all those guys this spring. So welcome, guys. I think hopefully you'll enjoy what we're going to talk about here. Let me go ahead and call this up. All right.
And so let me add, I wish that I had had a club that had a program like this. It would have saved me about 20 years. So listen up, pay attention.
Okay, before I get going on this, I just want a public service announcement, announce for our existing members. We are going to try to fly next Wednesday, February 5th. Hopefully the weather will cooperate. And we're not going to start new guide training this soon. We need to get our existing members up to speed after a pretty miserable winter that we've gone through and a lot of currency issues. So I'm offering training that day, and we'll work on a tow pilot. But for all the current existing members, and we've got a pretty good informal quorum already, mark your calendar for next Wednesday, guys. All right, a background on this presentation and then the one to follow from Fernando. In the past, guys, we had our thermaling discussion rolled in with our cross-country ground school. It was the first block, and Hartley usually gave it before I would get into the first block for the actual cross-country instruction. But we decided to go with a standalone presentation, a night just dedicated to thermaling for several reasons. One was the stats that Mitch showed, particularly the very many short flights on EFX. And my own observations flying around on local soaring flights that could stay up 2 to 3 hours, the sheer number of 0.3s that guys were logging with the twin EFX, the Grove 102, and also Whiskey, our discus. A lot of short flights on days that I thought were quite soarable. So that's always troubled me. I'd like to try to help those guys out. If you do personally have a lot of 0.3s in your logbook, hopefully we have something for you tonight. Okay. We've also had some feedback from some of our fairly new members from last year that they would like some more emphasis on this. So I'm asking all the instructors to reemphasize thermaling whenever possible this year. Fernando's going to have some more to say on coaching in a little bit, but at all levels, we just need to get out there and practice. But the background that I'm going to talk about tonight is more than just the sticker and rudder aspects of thermaling. It's some stuff that is sort of laying up the foundation, if you will. So that's what we'll do. The good news is we're just about out of our winter season. I look at my logbook for the last 5 years or so, and I start to see long flights in February. So better weather, guys, is right around the corner. We're already starting to see a warm up this week and next. So fingers crossed on that. And our first state record cross-country flights were actually flown in March. So we're closer than you think to much better conditions. So hang in there, and hopefully we'll all get in the air before too long. Anyways, moving on, there's lots of literature on thermaling. There's some great authors that have put out books on this and rolled it in with their cross-country books, et cetera. We've all seen the diagrams, cross sections of thermals, the many books that have schematics of that, and how to tackle this rising column of air. And I will get to that, but I'm going to talk about some things beforehand that I think are also important. The things I'm going to talk about won't necessarily net you a better climb rate, but if you don't regard these basics that I'm going to talk about, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, I think, when it comes to connecting and climbing and lift. So let's go ahead and talk about that now. Objectives today: learn to stack the deck in your favor. And that's really the first objective I also used for my later cross-country presentation. We want to stack the deck, okay? We want to improve thermaling climb rates, because for cross-country average ground speed, it's all about fast climbs. For our newer guys, it's much more important to be able to climb quickly and get going than whether you're cruising at 70, 80, or 90 knots in relative terms. So fast climb rates are critical for high average ground speeds. But the added benefit of being able to climb better in thermals if flying locally is we're probably going to stay up longer. That kind of makes sense. So we're trying to increase the duration for club ship flyers, and so achieve longer flights and increase fun and self-confidence. And finally, if you can thermal better and stay up longer, you're probably going to be more motivated to go cross country. Okay. And any of these guys, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to shout out. Okay. We can stop and discuss any of this stuff. So this is what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about weather knowledge and expectations. And I kind of tie those two together. Okay. We'll talk about pacing, teamwork, talk about handling a blue day, handling a day with Q. We'll talk about attention ratios. And finally, I'm going to talk about actually thermaling, stick and rudder skills. But you can see that I'm going to talk about a fair amount of preliminary items that I think are very important, particularly for the local flyer who's having a difficult time staying up in EFX or whatever. I think these first 6 bullets may help you a lot in that regard. So we'll finally get into stick and rudder skills, my very simplistic view of how to thermal, and then a self-critique. Because I think it's very important, if you do have a sled ride, a 0.3, when other people are staying up, that you ask yourself some tough questions. So we'll get to that. And again, if you have any questions, guys, don't hesitate to ask. There are no dumb questions here, okay? Here we go. Weather prep. I'm retired. I stalk the weather, absolutely stalk it. Begins days before and general to specific. You know, what's the evening weather lady saying about Saturday? What's the Weather Channel saying? But get more specific as we get closer to your day of interest. And the day prior, I'm going to have a good grasp of what the conditions should be like on my day of interest. Is it going to be blue? Are we going to have Q, et cetera, et cetera? And what is the thermal thickness? What's the thermal layer vertically? What are the winds aloft, at top of lift? All those things I want to know, okay? And there's all sorts of tools out there. Hopefully a lot of you already have those on your phone or your tablet. Forecast discussion is always excellent to talk about the big picture. I like Windy. I think they're very accurate, the Windy app, and it's just a lot of functionality there. A lot of guys love SkySight. I still use XC Skies. I like that XC Skies NAM model. I think it just nails the lift every time. Very accurate to me. And of course, soundings. Really be able to interpret those and understand what the sounding is telling you. Any questions, guys? Pacing. By late morning of your day of interest out there, be reading the sky constantly. From 10 o'clock on, read the sky, understand what's going on, talk to other guys, and know when to expect lift and be ready. And what does ready mean for me? If you have the glider, drag that main tire up on the keyhole, on the asphalt, shoot on, ready to go, okay? So particularly for the longer flights, for badge duration flights, or if you're going cross country, get ready early, okay? Ready early. Teamwork. Again, none of these things will guarantee you a better thermaler, but I think in the absence of this, you may have trouble, okay? So let's go through some of this right now. If you are particularly flying a club ship, know who else is flying the glider, coordinate with the OD, and figure out what your takeoff time is going to be. So coordinate for that desired takeoff time. A goal in the club ship, we know we have a 1 hour flight duration limit if other users want to use it next, but your goal in a club glider should be that 1 hour flight, okay, and not the 0.3. So more specific teamwork, after you check in with the radio check with the Pawnee, tell the tow pilot where you want to go. And for all our new guys that are going to be flying their day one training in the next month or two, this is standard for me. I want to get a 2 loud and clear check with the Pawnee as we're hooking up. And on that second transmission, after we get the loud and clears out of the way, I'm going to give them a general direction.
33 zeros. 1,000, 3 zeros, million, 6 zeros, billion, 9,000, 3 zeros.
We're getting some sort of feedback here from somebody. So be specific with the tow pilot on where you want to go, okay? Because this is absolutely important for success once you pull the yellow handle. And then once I'm on tow and we turn out of traffic back to approximately west, Now I've got a much better view of the situation, and then I'll fine tune where I want that tow plane to take me. Okay. And bottom line is, don't let him take you places you don't want to go. If it's a day with Q and you're flying EFX, I do not want to be let off in the big blue hole. Okay. So take charge of the situation. The tow pilots will be happy to take you where you want to go and do that. Okay. And that not sound insulting to some people that I even mention it, but guys, I see it. I see it over and over where guys release in a big blue hole and I go, what was that about? You know, and then they're back on the ground in 20 minutes. So again, this is stacking the deck in your favor, launching when you want to and going where you want to go. I think something else finally on teamwork is important, and that is sharing lift info with others, particularly on blue days. If you've got good lift, sing out and offer it to others. You know, that's kind of a pet peeve of mine when guys keep secrets out there on blue days and we don't know somebody's got a 2 or 3 knotter, which we'd love to share on days like that. So share lift with others out there, guys. It's all part of teamwork. Any questions, guys, before we move on this slide? All right. Let's talk about a blue day. And that's typical over the winter here. If we have a VFR day, it's going to be blue, and we rarely ever see Q. We had some a few days ago, looked beautiful, but it was very windy. But blue days are common this time of year. So expect lift may be weaker and start later. It could be late as 1:30 or 2 p.m. And it could be a very short window of opportunity. Lift usually dies 2 to 3 hours before sunset. With a 5:30 sunset, you can figure out when that lift's going to die, maybe around 3:30 or so. So you may have a fairly short window of opportunity, but be ready. Be ready. As far as steering the tow plane, steering towards any gaggles or ground hotspots that may be out there. I like downtown Monroe, the jail area works. Sometimes the golf course is good. And if the jumpers aren't active, the runway itself can be a pretty good hotspot for lift. Okay, so a couple of important things on a blue day. Release and lift, and not arbitrarily at 3,000 feet. You know, in training land, we often go to 3,000 feet because we've got a fair amount of air work to do. But don't get into that habit. We've all done it where we've gone through good lift at 2,500 feet or so. And yeah, we'll stay on the rope a little bit longer. We release at 3 and then we can't find the doggone thing. So the no lift rate of climb on the Pawnee is about 6 knots. So if you see him suddenly bump up and then you bump up and now you're seeing 8 or 9 knots on the variometer, you're probably in pretty good lift. So release then, whether it's 24, 26, whatever, don't stay on the rope to 3,000 feet. When you get off in lift, guys, stay with that first thermal for a while. Get a feel for it, what kind of personality it has. I'm very reluctant to leave my first thermal, particularly on a blue day, okay? And that's what we're talking about today. So I don't fall in love with lift, particularly when I'm going cross country, but I really don't want to leave this first date until I see something better nearby or I'm just not happy with it at all. So stick with that first thermal for a while, get a feel for it. The 5th bullet down there, you know, this is the whole key to my very simplistic view of thermaling is I want to build a mental model. Where is the strong side and the weak side of my turn? You get that surge in the seat. The strong side may lift that wing up. That when you go through it, you're getting an indication on the vario that's better than on the other side. You just have to correlate all that together to figure out where the strong and weak side is. And I try to do that when I'm flying with guys and have them assess it for me, okay? And then the next step, every 1 to 2 turns, I'm shifting towards that core. And really no more than 2 to 360s, and I'm making some sort of subtle shift and always trying to work towards the stronger side of the turn, okay? We have all these books that show these cylinders to be, you know, very simplistic, perfect circles and all. And we know what's the John Murray adage, partly that thermals are chimneys built by drunk masons or whatever, but not perfect circles. So you got to work at it to maintain.
It's
Okay.
Tom Knopf, but that's okay.
Tom Knopf, okay, all righty. So every 1 to 2 turns, I'm shifting towards that core, and we'll talk about the mechanics of that in a minute. And while I'm doing that, I'm looking at other gliders nearby. And man, I'm a comparison shopper. The horizon, as we look out there, guys, is actually slightly above the line between sky and earth, okay, because of the curvature of the earth. It's slightly above that. But you can just watch relative climbs out there and see how they're doing. And if they're nearby and they're climbing better, man, I'm heading that way. Okay, so I'm constantly comparison shopping, particularly on blue days. So that's my pitch for a winter day or a dry spring or summer day. Any questions, any of this, guys? Am I going too fast? Is this about right?
Yeah. Keep going.
Everybody's happy? All right. Handling a queue day. One thing I do is I want to note when the cues start popping, and just reflexively, I look at my watch. You know, what time is it? 10:20? Ooh, nice and early. You know, 11:30. Okay, they're probably going to cycle once, maybe disappear and then come back, but it's nice to see that first pop of cue. Be ready to launch then when the bases rise and the cue have substance. Typically, those baby cue are fairly low and don't have much substance to them. But after another hour or so, they should lift and have a good body to them. And when they have a good body, good substance, shape, etc., it's time to go, okay, above 2,000 feet. And places like Cordele, the cloud bases can rise 1,000 feet per hour very rapidly. Around Monroe, they rise a little bit more slowly, but nonetheless, they should rise nicely a few thousand feet over their first pops, okay? As before, once I'm on tow, I'm going to fine tune the steering with the tow pilot to the nearest good looking cue. Something nice, dark bottom is what I'm looking for nearby, okay? One thing that I see a lot when I'm riding in the back seat is guys don't tilt their head up enough to read the sky. So get in the habit of tilting your head up to better gauge the quality of these cue. You know, they're a spectrum from gorgeous to ratty. Okay, so really start to assess that, and as you move around, assess their development. Is it falling apart or is it improving, et cetera, et cetera. So tilting the head up is a hugely important skill to have, particularly on days with cue. Always assume there's other gliders under the same cloud as you head towards it and clear, okay? One technique is to approach it at, put the cloud at say 11 or 1 o'clock, so it's not right at 12 o'clock because you have a little bit better forward visibility, slightly off the nose. But nonetheless, assume any cue that's in the airport area is going to have other gliders under it. So clear like crazy as you approach it. I'd like to release and lift under cue, if at all possible. And again, this last bullet for you EFX guys in particular, because you don't have the glide to reach cue if you're out of position. Do not release in blue holes on days with cue. Steer that tow plane. I can't emphasize how important that is to take charge of your tow to get you where you want to be. Okay. Questions on this one, guys? All right. Let's talk about attention priorities. Again, I haven't talked stick and rudder at all, have I? You know, these are preliminaries that I think are very important, but in the absence of them, again, success may be in doubt. So that's why we're covering this for the club ship flyer who's struggling to stay up. Attention priorities for the new glider pilots, they're focused primarily inside the cockpit. That's just human nature. I see that a lot. The guys' heads are pointed straight ahead. They're not looking out for traffic, and they're not clearing inside the turn. That comes with practice and comfort levels. Okay, if we don't do that, if we're not focused outside the cockpit, we're ignoring important traffic information and lift clues. Okay. So important that we're outside. What do experienced pilots do? They focus outside the glider almost totally. The glider literally is flying on autopilot in a thermal in terms of the stick and rudder inputs. So how do they do that? Okay. One is for coordinated turn. For these guys, it's all muscle memory. They know how much foot is needed with stick throw so that that yaw string is straight all the time. They're just not fighting that thing and turning it into a windshield wiper. So you just got to practice and practice. Practice solo, practice with an instructor if you would like to go up for a little dual instruction, which is going to be offered this spring. But practice so that your coordinated turns are just absolute muscle memory, okay? Peripheral vision sets the pitch to control speed in the turn. So we've talked about roll in and roll out and change in bank angle, and now we're talking about peripheral vision as your eyes are looking inside the turn, which is generally where most of our visual lookout should be when we're banked up. Peripherally, we see the nose of the glider, and we can see it in relation to the horizon, and we nail the speed that we want, okay? Thus, the airplane is literally on autopilot. And I've been up there at times, and I'm sure other experienced guys have been, that I've been flying around, local, it's not really cross-country weather, I'm just flying around locally. And I'll realize, for the last 15 minutes, I haven't really paid any attention to actually flying this machine. It's all outside and getting a feel for where the lift is and moving my circle. And it's just an absolute unconscious act. And that just takes practice. It just takes time. And that's what we're hoping guys will do this spring, okay? So the bottom line there is the focus shifts from aircraft control to thermal control, knowing where that core is and moving our turn circle to maximize climb rate. Anything, guys, on this slide you want to talk about? Questions? All right, finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about the stick and rudder skills involved. And Fernando, I believe, will talk about this a lot more. Mine is pretty simplistic. Sometimes as an instructor, I'm out there and I go, okay, what am I really doing? Am I telling other guys what I'm really doing, or am I making up something that isn't what I really do? So I think really what I'm about to say is what I do, and I think it's worked well for me for many years. So I just want to offer it. And guys that know me know I've got a very simple philosophy on as many things in aviation as possible. And I think thermaling can really be a very simple act, but well executed, okay? So without further ado, let's talk about it. First and foremost, visual clearing all turns absolutely is critical for safety. Always, always clear before you throw the stick and the foot in to bank up, okay? Absolutely, for survival purposes, we've got to do that. And when we're in the turn, my head is on a swivel, but much of my visual scan is inside the turn, okay? But clear for all turns, and that's very important for our new guys that are going to be coming on board. We're going to hit that strongly when we fly. So bullet number 2 there, what's my first goal? Hey, I'm not talking about fine tuning this. I just want to get close, okay? If I get a good kick in the butt and followed by a vario surge, I'm going to go right into a hard turn, and I don't care if it's left or right, guys. I just want to get close, okay? Now, obviously, if you're the second or third guy in the turn, the thermal, you're going to turn in the direction of everybody else. But for argument's sake, we'll say you're the first guy there. So turn just so you're close, okay? And then we can fine tune it from there. Stick and rudder is always applied together. Now, there's all sorts of advanced techniques that I'm not going to go into because, again, I'm a KISS guy. Keep it simple. To me, and what I tell the brand new guys when we start flying glass ships, and some of them have not flown glass before, is imagine this stick and rudder are mechanically connected with metal, okay? That if you move the stick, the rudder pedal depresses. That's how simultaneous they are. The rudder should never be an afterthought. And guys flying with me will hear that again, okay? Never an afterthought. Keep the yaw string straight. For the dry single seaters, I thermal at 45 to 50 knots. I see no reason to go faster. You know what that does to our turn circle, turn radius. And I don't really need to get any slower than 45 knots at about 45 degrees of bank. So those are good thermaling speeds, which I set, again, peripherally with pitch, okay? Set a pitch picture and don't chase gust-induced speed changes. Just accept that, particularly with strong lift, you may see more. But that's just a good thing to do. Tools in the toolbox, another favorite expression of mine. It's not all about steep bank turns, it's a mix. So I'm going to use the shallower bank turn as a tool in the toolbox for two good reasons. If I need to search a larger area, a bigger turn circle, by design, I want to, because I'm trying to find the core, yeah, I'll shallow my bank out, increase my turn radius, okay? Another place for a very brief input of shallower bank is to shift my circle towards the core, all right? So shallower banks have a time and a place. And then boom, steep bank when feeling the surge in the seat in the vario response, okay? So I'm back and forth and I'm coming out of that steep bank turn every 360 or 720 to loosen the bank a little bit, shift the circle, and then reestablish the bank. It's as simple as that. So the turn circle is shifted by relaxing the bank briefly towards the core, then reestablishing it. Back to about 40 to 45 degrees of bank once centered. Okay. Questions on this one, guys? This is, I'm sure Fernando will talk about this much more, but you can see all the preliminaries that I went through in terms of coordinating where to go, where to release, et cetera, before we got to this point. Okay, because none of this will do you much good if you release and sink and you're many miles from the cue. Okay, so this is assuming that you've steered yourself properly to get into lift, and now, boom, do all this. Questions on this, guys? Gaggle thermaling. Newer pilots are reluctant to thermal with others, and that's a preservation thing. We get it. And one of the things that upsets me sometimes, I'm shameless when it comes to poaching somebody else's thermal if I think they're climbing better, but I hate it when I run somebody off, and I see that. I've run them off before they've reached the top of lift, and I go, doggone it, come back here. You just want to grab them by the collar and pull them back, but they don't. They leave. Okay, so we need to get comfortable thermaling with others. Okay, safely acclimatizing yourself is a necessary skill, particularly on blue days. If I see a couple of guys over the jail or the golf course or downtown Monroe and I don't have a clue where the lift is, man, I've got to go there. Okay, I've got to go there. So how can we do this? Third bullet there, first get confidence joining with an altitude difference, an altitude stack. You can practice this more safely, more comfortably, if there's a little bit of altitude difference between you and the guy that's already thermaling. Not always the case, but often that guy will be higher than you because you've expended some altitude and cruise to get to that thermal, which is sort of the standard sawtooth cross-country profile. But yeah, just practice that with a safe altitude differential until you can comfortably get into their lift, okay? And then as you get more confident with that, become more comfortable joining at near the same altitude or at the same altitude, okay? Very important skill. And flying dual with instructors, we can hopefully find a scenario where we can practice that together to get you more comfortable with that, but hugely important. One of the analogies to how to do this is the bicycle chain and sprocket technique. Just on the bicycle chain for the rear tire, the rear wheel sprocket, that's how you basically approach a gaggle thermaling. Simplistically, I'm going to be a little bit outside that sprocket, if you will, outside the turn, and then join from the outside into that circle. If you keep your nose pointed behind the glider ahead of you, you should not have a traffic conflict. Okay, so that's also an important aid to comfortably slide into position. Don't assume there's just one in front of you. Scan aggressively to see if there's more than one, because that can be a real safety item, okay? But once you've ascertained how many there are, slide in behind them, keep the nose pointed slightly behind their glider, and then maintain bank and relative spacing for the number of gliders in that gaggle. Okay. Anybody want to add, particularly for this slide, any techniques to help guys out with gaggle thermaling, guys? Hartley, Fernando, anybody?
Yeah, I'd just say one thing. When you say keep the nose pointed behind the glider,
Yeah,
pointed to the outside.
that's
Don't
what I
point-
mean. Outside his turn.
Don't
Yeah.
point to the inside.
Yes. Behind his tail, but out behind his tail, basically, point on the outside of his circle. Okay. All right. Just about to wrap this up, guys. Self-critique, I think, is important. If you have a frustratingly short flight, I think we need to ask ourselves some questions once we get the glider off the runway and we catch our breath. You know, after you sit back down and can ponder it, ask yourself these simple questions. Did I launch into a soarable sky, and did I release and lift? Okay. If others are staying up before or after my flight, it's a soarable sky. And only you will be able to determine if you released and lift. Okay. Did I stay with that first thermal until something better appeared nearby? Okay. Again, I hang on to that first thermal because I don't know the personality of the sky yet, and I'm just trying to get a feel for what the day is like. So did I stay with that thermal, or did I leave it prematurely? And it may not be great. It may be zero sync, you know, but in January, if it's zero sync, man, I'm hanging on for dear life and I'm not leaving it until I determine there's something better nearby. Okay. Did I build a proper mental model and shift towards the core? Was I able to self-assess strong side and weak side? The strong side's over the right side. It's right 4 o'clock behind the right wing. Okay. Oh, well, how do I get to that point? I'm going to continue my turnaround, and then I'm going to shallow my bank to head in that direction for only 1 or 2 potatoes. And then boom, I'm going to get right back into the core. Okay. And lastly, did I observe other nearby gliders for better climb rates? Did I comparison shop? And if I did, were they within glide distance? Okay. And if they were climbing much better than me, did I consider maybe going over there and accepting the fact that maybe I need to fly with a gaggle? And was I confident and comfortable enough to do that? Okay. Or no, I'm not comfortable joining a gaggle, and because of it, I fell out, I landed. Okay. So that could be the reason. If that's the case, our instructors will be happy to help, because that's an important skill, but we understand there could be some stress involved with learning that skill. Questions, guys, on this last slide? All right, wrapping it up. We need to stack the deck in our favor. Okay, preparation, weather, glider, coordination with others, observing the sky. If it's a blue day, buzzards, other gliders is staying up. Are we getting pyreps from early training flights that, yeah, we're starting to get some bubbles at 1,000 feet, or pyreps from the tow pilot? Yeah, top of lift's about 1,500 feet. You might want to wait a while, or if it's January, maybe you don't. Communications with others. I can't emphasize how important that is. OD, other guys that are going to fly the same club glider, and particularly the tow pilot. Having him take you where you want to go. It's your tow. They're not cheap. I don't want to waste my money. Fly often, relax and make turns on autopilot. You know, that just takes practice. Focus should be outside so that you're very comfortable rolling in and rolling out. Fernando's going to talk about some exercises on that, but being very comfortable with the stick and rudder for coordinated turns, and sometimes abrupt changes in bank, abruptly getting to steep bank turn if the scenario calls for it. Always maneuver to maximize climb rate. Usually important, again, for cross-country average ground speed. And the happy byproduct for local flights is if you maximize climb rate, you're probably going to have a much longer, more satisfying flight. Constantly shop for the next good climb. Man, I'm doing that all the time. And of course, with Florm, I can see how Pat and Mitch are doing. And, oh, can I reach them or not? You know, but eyeballs work as well. So just look for better climbs outside as you come around each 360. Where are they in relation to the horizon? Don't hesitate to join others' thermals. I'm shameless about this, joining other thermals that I think are better than mine. Okay. So lastly, practice, fly, enjoy your improved skills. And that's all I've got, guys. Anything you want to talk about before I turn it over to Fernando?
Yeah, I want to add something as an instructor, Scott, that I'm willing to share information with the new guys right up to the point where they're out climbing me, and then I'm not giving any more information. And then I'm done.
Now we're
Which,
done.
yeah, but which won't be hard for the new guys, but I'm just telling you, when you get to the point where you're flying better than I am, then I'm not giving you any more nuggets.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
that's just a sign
I,
that
I
they've got,
second that.
Yes.
yeah, Chip, that's just a sign that they have a better instructor than you had.
Yeah, probably. But
Yeah.
I do want to say, jokingly aside, is for the new guys, is for all the instructor corps. I know Scott said this is, but boy, really welcome, and I look forward. I'm sure I speak for Pat and all of us. We really look forward to flying with you, and we hope that you stay along for a long, long time.
All
Very good.
right. Yes.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to Fernando, and we have a lot of guys that don't know much about Fernando Silva, but he is a past U.S. national 15-meter champion. And need I say more? So without any further ado, Fernando, let me stop share here and turn it over to you.
Hey,
Okay.
Scott, that was really very good. I got like 6 things that I'm going to incorporate that I learned from you. And I mean, I just really liked what you did. If people can go from staying up 0.3 and stay an hour, then how do we use that hour to really learn new skills? And that's what this is going to be about. I am sick and tired of PowerPoint presentations. No disrespect, yours was fantastic, but I'm learning that there is something that I'm going to show you guys that was like transformational for me. I'm going to share my screen, okay? If I can do that. Hopefully I can.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Do you guys see a little PowerPoint screen in there?
We do.
Yes.
Yeah, let me see if I can make it big. Okay, do you see a total screen now?
We do.
Yes.
All right. This was a kind of a transformational thing to me when I heard this quote from Albert Einstein. Learning is experience. All else is just information. And I started to figure out that Scott was very kind. I fly a lot of national championships. I've flown in the worlds. And when I compare my rates of climb with the top pilots, I am a very bad thermaler. And I've been at this for many years. I leave 30, 40% of the climb rates against my competitors. And I'm trying to figure out how can I become a better thermaler? And this, when you put that together with this, I think the goal that I now have to help me and everybody here is to take a coaching approach, and especially self-coaching. So, for example, let me give you an example. Scott said, which is very important, release when you are in a lift above 22,000, 2,500, just release and lift and stay in the first thermal until you have evidence that there's something better. So I started thinking, well, what's the experience I want to have? Is it Hartley's experience of getting all the way to the top? Not really. The real experience is what Scott said, relax and make turns on autopilot. Okay, now let's talk about what you really want to learn in that first thermal. What you really want to learn is this. I don't know how many people watched the G-Deo seminar. Did several people here watch G-Deo?
Anybody who watched it, raise your hand.
Yeah.
I did.
Because
Okay,
it's really
a chunk
good.
of people. It's really, really good. But in the interest of not lecturing to you guys, I want to talk about what experiences I want to have in that first thermal. And per G-Deo and per Scott, you've got to learn how to make turns on autopilot, and not just any kind of turns, because you already know how to make turns. What you really are trying to learn is 45 degrees at the slowest possible speed. Now, I don't recommend banking 45 degrees in Eastern thermals. In the World Championship in Poland, we were only banking 35 to 40. But until you bank a glider 45 or 50, you're not going to be automatic. And we're going to talk about why not. So goal number one in that first thermal is you put it at 45 degrees of bank. And now, once you're 45, and the way you know that is like some gliders, like the ship hurts, you know, there's a curve thing, and everybody I hope knows about the screws, et cetera, et cetera. So when I say 45, it has to be really 45. And to make it more interesting, so you really learn something in that first thermal, you need to try to actually stall the glider. You got to fly as slow as possible and then slower than possible. So you learn the feel of the incipient stall and the potential spin. You know, you're very high. The 21 is very simple. You just put the nose down and you recover. You know, I mean, I'm not going to teach you how to recover from spins. You won't spin. You just mush out. You need to feel that. So you getting the experience of 45-degree banks near stall, you got to force it. Now, once you're there, that's skill number one. I'm only going to teach you 5 skills that you're going to teach yourself through experience. Skill number one is 45 degrees as slow as possible. Not because you're going to thermal like that, but because until you know the edge of the envelope, you're not going to know how to be automatic. Because there will be gusts, there'll be things that are going to hold a glider, and so on. So that's skill number one. All right. Skill number two. This glider here, you see the nose is perfectly where you want it on the horizon. Can you all see my yellow little pointer?
Yes.
Okay. The nose is where you want it. Unfortunately, the airspeed is going to be going up, going down, going up, going down as you go in and out. You're going to have wind, you know, gusts. The airspeed is all over the lot, even though, even if you could maintain the nose perfectly on the horizon, the airspeed is going to be going up and down 3 and 4 knots. Okay. That's just the nature of the beast as you go in and out or get horizontal gusts. Gideo talks all about it, so I won't have to. So it makes it hard to keep the nose on the horizon because when you come out the side of the thermal where you got a tailwind behind you on that side, that tailwind is going to reduce airspeed and the glider's nose is going to drop. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just that all of a sudden, the perceived speed of the glider dropped 5 knots and the glider stability drops. When you are not exactly center and you exit the upwind side of the thermal, because remember, the wind is going around the thermal. The thermal is a column of air, especially the one that I want everybody to practice on, which is by the power plant. That thing is stationary. So when you go in and out, we're going to learn a heck of a lot. We'll talk a lot about that later. But when you come out on the upwind side, all of a sudden, you got a lot more airspeed on the nose, and the glider is going to want to come up. So, and the side gusts are going to make this little yaw string vibrate. Now, so what are the two choices? So how do you pull the nose up? You pull back on the aileron. When you pull back on the aileron, the nose is going to move in this direction.
Elevator.
And then it's going to, if you don't use enough inside rudder, the nose is going to fall. Oops. Uh-oh. Hang on. Another way to pull the nose up is to step on the top rudder, which will bring the nose this way, which is also up in relation to the horizon. So you've got right rudder will bring the nose above the horizon. Aileron pull, elevator pull, not aileron, forget that. Elevator pull will bring the nose this way. Right rudder will bring the nose there. And you want some combination of the two, which you've got to learn. And if you only use what you've been taught, which is you bring the nose up with the elevator, you're going to get an oscillation. Let me see, there's got to be a way to prevent. Okay, here we go. So your goal is to practice flying slow at 45 degrees. And your second goal is to play with the effect of controls. Play with the effect of control so that you know what happens. Gliders behave in very odd ways when they are near stall speed at this angle and you got 18 meters of wingspan. It doesn't behave like a power plane. And you've got to learn that so you can fly unconsciously as the gusts are bumping you around. All right. So our goal then, to get experience, to learn via experience rather than learn via textbook, is to take that first thermal and do 45 degrees, then go over the power plant, which is going to be a turbulent thermal. That's what you want, hard, turbulent, but you know where it is. So centering is not going to be the issue because centering is another learning later. And you're going to want to experiment with the effect of controls. Put in aileron, put in rudder with the aileron, put cross controls, pull back, really play with the glide. This is where I am because I'm flying a high performance 18-meter plane, which is very delicate, which is very sensitive with dihedrals. And the finesse with which you got to maneuver the controls as you come in and out of thermals and you hit gust is amazing. And the difference between the top pilots and me is amazing. Okay, and I'm learning that airplane. So that's your second goal. Go over to the power plant and experience control inputs at 45 degrees of bank. I mean, if you do it 30, you're not going to learn anything because you already know how to fly at 30 degrees of bank. All right. Also, I mentioned that you need to fly as slow as you possibly can. It turns out that you're going to practice at, say, 50 knots, 45, 50 knots, like Scott said, at 45. That gives you 16 seconds rate of turn. One of the real important experiences, you got to experience what a 16-second rate of turn is. It's amazingly fast. I don't think hardly anybody flies around a circle that fast, but you try to gain the experience of what that feels like. And in order to get that experience, you got to have your UDI and you got to record your flight, and then you got to go look at the circles and, and CU or something and decide, are you able to circle in 20 seconds or less, which is the ideal area. 20 seconds can be done in a combination of slowing down to 40 knots at about 35 degrees, or 45 degrees at 40, or 51 degrees at 45, and so on. And notice that those all are in their 200 or so radius, and the thermals are very small. They're only about 600-foot circles or less. So until you learn how to thermal and circle in that time, you're not going to be able to grow cross country well, period, end of story. Now, this is on a dry glide. My glide is almost impossible because it's so heavy, full of water for competition. I mean, it just, I can't thermal in under 20 seconds. And I need to learn because I know some of my competitors can. I can't. But a discus without water, a EFX, a K21, yes, you should be able to turn because mathematically 40 degrees at 51 will give you 20 seconds. All right. Got the third experience we're looking for. So now we went over to the power plant and we learned something. Moving on. See how we all know the model. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but at the level that we're talking about, we are dealing with outflow thermals, which have a certain signature that's quite different than when the thermal is inflowing. I won't go into the details. If you want to be more advanced, you must go down low and feel the turbulence characteristics that occur on inflows into states. Okay, and also, by the way, the thermals are narrow down here, they're not up here. I don't have any problems with you practicing up here. You're only going to learn one kind of turbulence signature, one kind of control, calculations, and deviations from the glider, but that's fine. All right. But then Scott says something much more important, which is the next thing you need to experience. He said that when in cumulus, tilt your head up. And this is not tilting the head up. Tilting the head up, what Carl does, if you ever flew to Carl Streeting or others, is like this. When I flew in South Africa, in Namibia with world champions, they look straight up and they can identify in the clouds, the wispiness and where the vortexes are. And they are cloud mapping. So, this is also a teacher to fly looking outside the cockpit. It's one thing to fly looking at the horizon and scanning and all of that. That's easy enough. Try flying looking 90 degrees up and see if you can still maintain control and maintain the nose and maintain airspeed. So the third exercise is you go on clouds and you're trying to gain experience. You're trying to use your hour that you're now able to stay up to learn something. And you're going to learn two things. You're going to learn cloud mapping, and you're going to learn how to fly without looking at any instruments, in fact, without looking at the horizon. Total seat of the pants. Amazingly fantastic practice. You're learning stuff through experience. All right, that was number 3. Let's go on. Then, if we're lucky enough to have the wind and we have clouds, don't thermal here. Don't in fact thermal here. Don't even thermal here. Keep going and experience different. Look at up. Map this thermal. See what it looks like from below and how that cloud looks like. Map this thermal. Map this thermal. Map this thermal. In other words, fly cloud streets. It's okay, always upwind, like Steve Winieski will support me on this. One of the most important things you can learn is straight flying upwind, because you're probably going to be able to get back to Monroe. But use the experience of flying through bubbles or streets or whatever you want to call these little puffy clouds that are normally aligned with the wind. Incredible experiential thing. Okay, you're learning what the signature is upon entry, a thermal, in the middle, and out. That's what you're trying to learn. So you're learning by experience. And now we're learning cloud signatures and turbulence signatures adjacent to thermals. Another way to do this, another one that we thought about, Harley and I have been kind of brainstorming some of these things that we want to then train the coaches to train others, is once you've got a very good thermal, let's say with a big cloud, get out of it, come through it. Don't circle when you're in the middle of it. Keep going through, keep going through, keep going through, come out the other side. Okay, now correlate the vario that you heard, the needle that you saw, and the seat of the pants. Do it again. Do it again. Traverse thermals. You're mapping the signature of the thermal. What does it feel like when it's bubbling on the edge? What does it feel like when you got the outflow gust encounter? What does it feel like at the peak? What does it feel like when you get the tailwind at the edge? Blah, 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 blah. You're going to map the thermal linearly before you really get good at mapping the thermal in centering. Experiences. You must have experiences that you don't normally already have. Normally, you just get into a thermal, you circle. Well, how are you going to learn what it feels like going in and out of a thermal? If you don't keep everything steady at perfect 60 knots and don't touch anything, just fly right through it. Okay, it's being mapped by the power plant or by the. Okay, then Scott says, what do you do in blue days? I think that was a very good point. Chimneys are built by drunk sailors. This was that chemical fire that we had about, 2-3 months ago? This is taken, I was driving out of Monroe. And what I noticed here, first of all, you notice how there are all these turbulences and eddies. And then you notice that this thermal goes sideways and up, then sideways and up, and sideways and up, and then blows away. I mean, it's like climbing a stair step. And if you're just circling constantly, you're going to be falling out the bottom here, for example, or You know, I mean, you're going to be off. This thing requires recentering. All right. So, and you got to know your winds. In other words, if this is a thermal and you fly too low under it or too high, you know this is a thermal generator. But where are you going to guess? How far below is it? Is it here? Is it like a mile down? Or is it half a mile? In other words, are you going to guess here, guess here? Well, you can't guess. The only way to fly this thing is to fly away and then come into it. In other words, approach it from here and then come into the wind until you cross it. This is very important. If you approach a thermal perpendicular to the wind, your chances of hitting it are pretty small. You got to know, I mean, you have to imagine exactly where the zigzags are taking that thermal. Okay, I hope that makes sense.
Hey, Fernando,
Um,
this is really excellent. Can you go back to the one before with the local picture, the
yes,
previous
sir.
one? What's the salient point there for you when you see that stair step of how to address? That's a really great picture. What is this a winds aloft issue? I mean, when you talk about this, why things are rotating, how to address this, because that's a really great picture. What
Isn't
do
it
you think when
amazing? I
you
mean, I
see that?
learned so much. You've seen my, okay, first of all, G-Dale and I are having discussions, and I'm working very closely with Dave Nadler now on a new variometer design that eliminates gusts and so on. So I'm learning a tremendous amount. I'm also working with a group in Europe on uh, large scale eddy systems and
Mhm.
how thermals are formed via the, and I'm learning a tremendous amount. But some of the learnings here are the thermals, as G says, they're actually bubbles and they're sequential bubbles. They
Right.
actually donuts going up through the sky. Now, this looks linear and it probably is because the donuts merge, but it's pretty complex. I mean, you've got toroids, you know, you get smoke rings. Okay, Chip, here it is. You know, when
Yeah.
you blow a cigarette smoke ring
Yep.
and it rotates and goes up, this is kind of has those characteristics. And so it gets an impulse up, then it loses energy and blows sideways. Then it gets an impulse up, loses, blows sideways. The wind is not quite shearing as much as these steps are, but it's really, this is the pulsating nature of the thermal.
I think this
Does that
really
make some
drives
sense,
home,
Chip?
yeah, because it really drives home your point and Scott's point about having to make adjustments. Look at that stair step. It's really a great picture.
Yeah,
Having to make little adjustments all the time. Don't get complacent.
yeah.
Make the adjustment.
I mean, if
Yep.
you're here, okay, and you're not going to climb as fast as the smoke, so you're here, you're doing good, and you're
Yep.
circling, but you the smoke, and then you fall here. Oh, whoa, what happened? Well, you got to adjust it over to here. Let's start
Exactly.
again. Oh, okay, now I'm not climbing. Oh, I got to adjust to here. Now I got to climb here. Now I got to adjust to here. I got to climb up.
So
I,
that really drives the point home that you and Scott are making about
and
adjustments.
the bottom line on that is if you lose that thermal, odds are if you head upwind, you'll find it again.
Exactly.
They're
Now
also good.
that is
Yep.
exactly what this is all about. You find the thermal by going upwind. And also you learn cloud mapping, street mapping by upwind, which says for a variety of reasons that I won't go into, you know, top pilots always turn upwind into a thermal. If your course line is not exactly aligned with thermals, you've got to, when you arrive at that cloud, you always want to get over here and turn into the wind through it.
Yeah.
Because there's a variety of reasons, but when you turn upwind, there's some dynamic soaring things that then give you a better read on the variable. When you turn downwind, it just tailwind hits you, you lose indicated airspeed. It looks like you're going down. It's very complex. So enter thermals into the wind and explore them into the wind. Does that make sense, Chip?
Sure does. And also that picture's great. So thank you.
Okay, so here that
And that
is.
one
Now,
also. Yeah.
now that gets to exactly the next point, which is entering and centering and then recentering. Now, for this, you really, really, really must watch that G-Dale thing where he shows the plates in a whole new approach, different than the BGA, the SSA, different than anything else. I watched a seminar done 4.5, 5 years ago in Australia where we had Sebastian Cava, Volcaniano, we had the top 20 pilots in the world. And G was doing a seminar, which was a 4-hour seminar on teaching them, working on how to thermal. This was an extremely high level discussion, as you can imagine. And everybody was talking about all the techniques and so on. And then at some point, Sebastian turns around, he's best pilot in the world, 15 times world champion. He says, you know, nobody has talked about getting away from weakness. That's the only thing I focus on is get away from weakness. Oh, and that led to and then my other great guy, US team member, Garrett, Garrett is fantastic. And the way he teaches it, he is a very good racing instructor. The way a US team member, uh, many times US national champion in the open class and others, he says basically, go to the core and fly around it. I mean, what could be simpler? Go to the core and fly around it, not through it. You know, and the way you go to the core is you get away from weakness. I mean, that's all there is to it. However, all these crazy books, the SSA gliding, every gliding manual out there, you unbank on here, you pull here, you do this, oh, I could not begin to learn through books how to center a thermal. When I'm in a sink, I fly away from it. When I know that where the core is, I fly around it. I mean, but the experience you got to learn, and we got to figure out how to experientially learn, is where is the core? Okay, and when the coaching program that Pat Jordan, Harley, myself, and others are going to launch, we're going to ask for some coaches. We're going to talk about how to coach in the air. It's all about experiential learning. Is how are we going to ask the student, okay, where's the core? There. Okay. And you flew right through it. Okay, let's do it again. Where do you think the core now is? There. Oh, good. But what did you do? You missed it. Why? Okay. So you've got to focus on where is the core, which requires spatial understanding based on the sun angle and the earth spinning. You've got to always be saying, there's the core, there's the weak point. I want to move from here to there. This is a conscious experience you got to learn how to do while you're flying the glider entirely by looking outside. And you got speed control, because if your speed oscillates, you're going to get false indications and you're going to miss the core. All right, let's talk about entry and centering. I'm sorry, this is going to be a little bit of information, and I'm against lecturing now. I want to just, but here are the experiences you got to learn to have. First is the one I mentioned, where you want to fly through the thermal. You want to feel the down. There's also, because remember, the thermals are like smoke rings. You know, they've got the eddies, the edges are going down, and then it's pumping up, going down. So you got to feel what the turbulence. G-Day on that seminar, which was an extraordinary seminar with all these world champions, they spent a lot of time talking about the turbulence signature. I mean, those guys are so good that they feel a turbulence of a certain time because the glider goes a certain way, and they said the thermal is there on the right. They know it, or the thermal is there. They can feel for the turbulence signature, and whether they're in the outflow zone or the inflow zone. If they're on the outflow, you know, the rudder's going to, the tail of the glider is going to be pushed this way, and it's going to bake towards the thermal, not away. So, you know, we always talk about, oh, turn towards the rising wing. That's not necessarily true. There are turbulence signatures where you want to turn towards a dropping wing. But, you know, that's real advanced stuff. But you got to get an experience that the fact that when you are in the best lift, you don't feel that you're climbing at all. When you're here, it's accelerating, it's increasing. This is the seat of the pants. You feel seat of the pants here. You don't feel anything here. You feel a sharp acceleration. Whoops. God. You feel a sharp acceleration, and then you feel this. The VAR is a worthless instrument for entering thermals. I mean, absolutely worthless. If you saw G. Deo's part 2, you know now why. Let me just give you an illustration for those who didn't see. When you hook up the glider on the runway, and the top liner starts going, and you are rolling on the ground, your VAR is going to show 10 knots up or 8 knots up. You're not gaining a foot. You're gaining energy. You're absorbing energy from the tow plane. You're gaining speed without losing altitude. That's a gain of energy. Another example that he uses. You climb on a big monster cloud street, okay? You get to cloud base, and then you push the nose down, and you're going faster and faster and faster to prevent from being sucked, okay? You haven't gained any altitude. The VAR is pegged up. You're not climbing, okay? You are absolutely level. You come out of the core of a thermal into a strong wind gust, the VAR is going to peg up, but you're not going up at all. I mean, you will gain a little bit, of course, if you pull, you do some dynamic soaring. The VAR is a liar. The VAR is a liar. So you have to learn sea-to-depend experiences, what I call turbulence signatures. What is acceleration? When you are in the core, when you are in the worst part. This can only be done through forcing yourself to go in and through and in and out consciously. I mean, if you're going in and out because you don't know where the core is, you're not going to learn the difference in the field. All right. Most people, I don't know if this is true or not, but a lot of instructors who are very experienced say they find that most people turn too soon. You know, you're coming through here, you turn too soon. You don't map enough of the core. Also, what's even worse is turning after the peak value is better, provided you really turn. You don't do a slow 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees. I mean, this is kind of fatal, right? You're coming through here, and let's say, especially if the wind is coming from behind, if the wind is coming from the nose, you're flying, it's up street instead of down street. When you come over the wind, remember, the thermal is a bit of a solid column of air. It does drift with the wind, but the wind also goes around it. You know, the Standard British thermal weighs 80,000 tons. It's got a momentum. The thermal that's coming out of the power plant is stationary over the power plant, and the wind is blowing around it. When you come out over here and the wind is coming from there, man, you got a major tailwind. The VAR is going to drop like crazy. And then when you turn into the wind, it's going to okay. So all those misperceptions of the variable in relation to the thermal experiences you got to have and learn. But basically, this is the way people kind of do it, which is not the way to do, but this is what's taught. You come through, you fly through, and you gradually increase, you come through, and then you pitch up and roll. I don't know any of that crap. End up with all those circles like G. So here is kind of the method, but this is the Sebastian Cava method, which means, the world champion method. You come in, you make a circle, and then at the weakest point, this is called when the glider, let's say, is here, this is pretty strong. Also, when I got some training from a French team pilot up in Minden a long time ago, says, Fernando, you must fly the first 2 circles at perfect bank and airspeed. You want perfect circles so that you can map the field of that thermal. Your first circle, you could have been turbulence. So fly it again until you're certain that right here is the weakest point. And the VAR actually is going to have a lag, so it's right here is going to tell us the weaker point. But I flew in Poland with Adam. Adam would bring the glider as soon as he would be coming here at 100 knots. As soon as he feels the turbulence, he pulls it up to 60. Boom, boom, levels it at 60 and holds everything steady. Everything steady. He's feeling. Total seat of the pants. He goes perfect circle. Boom. Now, he knows from one circle and his experience where the weak point is. But until you should do it again, just to verify you weren't, and then you know how to adjust. And now when you hear, now he says you want to go not to the core, you want to go around the core. And the core, when you hear you in the weak part, you've done it twice, you know that this side is the weak. You then look down the wing, and boom, you pick a landmark, and that's where you got to fly. Boom, you roll out, and you crank it back in and fly around the core. I mean, this is really simple, but you got to practice, you got to experience what it's like to go into a quick 45 degrees, which means a lot of rudder on entry. You want that glider to do almost a snap roll. You'd be amazed how fast a 21 rows if you push that rudder pedal all the way in. Because, I mean, you will be skidding a little bit, but that wing, as soon as you point that left wing into the wind, it's going to snap up. The plane is going to do this. You go to 45, you hold it right there. Toon, 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 toon. I know where it is. Boom, boom. Any questions or observations? I'm going pretty fast. Chipster, you're always the commentator.
Well, I would say it's something that you said it's extremely important here as we're talking about different levels. And myself as an instructor is what I tend to find that there, you know, to center, to do all these things is that one first skill set that's so important to get down before you can migrate to the circle, do all those things is, and as Scott calls it, is dragging that nose like a pencil across the horizon.
Exactly.
So that is that skill set, particularly when we talk about the early days of winter to get back and start practicing again. That's the one skill set that I notice when I'm flying with people is the difference between people that thermal well and don't thermal well is you cannot move to the circle. You cannot make those adjustments. The first primary step is to make sure you get whatever your bank ankle is. And I, you know, with 35, 45, I mean, your math is better than mine, but whatever it may be is you've got to practice dragging the nose across the horizon. Do not chase the airspeed indicator. Do not chase the vario. Practice that nose. And then even when you're making small adjustments, if you're making an adjustment, it means you're unbanking it. And even if you're unbanking it, you still need to keep that nose on the horizon. And if not, you get behind the aircraft.
And Chip, and I submit, and I believe very strongly, the only way you're really going to learn the effects of multiple controls is that very first exercise, which is 45-degree banks.
Yeah.
You've got to know how to handle the glider in gusty situations. That's why you go to the power plant. A smooth one otter, you know, thermals, you don't learn anything. I mean, you can stay up, you know, oh, I'm good. I can stay up in these 1 otters and a blue day, 2 otters, you know, that you're not going to learn anything. Go to 3 and 4 otters that are turbulent and bank it at 45 and hold it at 45 knots. You're going to learn that time. You're going to learn
Yeah, I
that
agree. And I don't know. I don't know if you have to throw everybody in the power plant at the beginning in February, but I will say in a gusty condition is you do have to learn to, it's a 3-dimensional rudder, stick, everything to make sure to really try and keep a constant bank angle, keep that nose on the horizon. And Scott's, I've always liked Scott's metaphor of I have a pencil and I'm dragging it across the horizon. Now, whatever the speed may be for that bank angle works great.
Yeah.
Now,
But
the other
exactly. Exactly.
point is that unless you fly this first couple circles accurately,
Yeah.
you will have no idea where you are and where anything else is. The only
Yes.
way that you can tell where something is if you have a frame of reference you can use.
Can I
Yes.
add something also, Fernando? For all our new guys, and I'll have some closing thoughts when we're all done here, some philosophy. But for all our new guys that their heads may be swimming right now that haven't checked out at Monroe yet, just look at this slide, guys. This is simple in all caps. This is simple. What Fernando has here is a very simple concept. And the initial turn circle and assessing the strong side and the weak side through seat of the pants, through wing movement through the vario. You often can easily determine the strong side and the weak side around here with a standard Monroe thermal. And then shallowing that bank out where you see rollout heading, you're not rolling out wings level, you're just relaxing the bank. And if you think of G. Dale's 2 plates, you're sliding that small plate towards the center of the big plate. This is simple stuff. So tell yourself, this is simple, I can do this.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
I was just say I'd like to emphasize that point on here because that was a big realization for me, Fernando. The way you characterized it a year or two back was, when you're in the weakest part, look down the wing. I think it was kind of a predecessor of fly away from the sink, but doing that helped me a lot. And then last year when I learned to recognize the vario lag and trying to correct for the fact that the weak point was actually a couple of seconds before I originally thought it was, that made a really
Yes.
big difference for me in terms of being able to stay reasonably well centered under a lot of circumstances.
Exactly. And the discipline, the hard discipline, which I am often too lazy, the one thing you must remind yourself, I am not going back there. Once to fly through bad air once, we all do it. To fly through the same bad air twice, shame on you. Shame on you if you fly through the same bad air twice. So if you do nothing, but what Sebastian does is, I refuse to fly through bad air twice. I'm not going to go in that part of the sky anymore. That is so critical. Okay. So this is all about experience in the air. You've got to be saying to yourself, where do I think the core is? Where's the bad air that I want to get away? You try. Did I do it? Not really. Okay, let's do it again. Okay. You're going to learn so much by always thinking, where's the bad? Where do I think the core is? Now, when we team fly, we pair fly in the US team. If you, for example, do this rollout too late, you're going to fly through the core, which is not desirable. But the one we got, we're pair flying, we're 180 degrees opposite. And we have this whole terminology that we're talking about lift rates as we go around together. As soon as I hit here, I say core. And this guy says bingo. And he then flies around where I marked the sky. I mean, I'm going to mark that core if I'm going to fly through it. And if you're flying with other gliders, Scott says gaggle flying is incredibly important, especially if you are exactly the same altitude with exactly the same bank angle. Then the other glider is a map of the sky. You're watching him rise, you're watching him fall. You say, okay, he rose here, he fell here. So now you're going to cut here. He's going to see you doing better. The two of you can just dance together, move that play together. So a more advanced experience you want to have, and hope everybody's considerate enough with your mates to fly like this, okay? Not like this. Don't fly behind somebody. That's extremely rude because he's mapping the sky for you, but you're not helping him map the sky. That just pisses people off. Okay, you must fly opposite at the same bank angle and the same speed. So when this glider rises, this glider knows to shift the circle over here. This guy then watches, and you dance together. So on purpose, fly 180 apart with somebody else at the same speed, same bank angle. You will learn a ton because every little mistake, the guy will climb you. It's a very fun, competitive sport. All right, moving on. So experiences is how you learn. Stick and rudder, if you can't, if this is what you do, and most people do, you're going to lose the throw. It's very hard. The G-Dale says, unless you got at least 500 hours, maybe more, you can't really maintain airspeed within 3 and 4 knots. I have trouble. I can't maintain airspeed within 3 or 4 knots. I need to improve my thermal a lot. And I know all this theory. I practice a lot, been practicing for many years. And there's so much more that you can only learn experientially, which is what makes this sport so good. Okay, now just a couple of basics. When there is a surge, when you fly into a headwind, You feel a surge. You're going to feel you're going to feel as if there's lift. But the first thing that happens is the airspeed increases quite rapidly. If you're flying at 50, it'll go to 55, 57. That means you hit a horizontal gust, not really an uptherm. Now, okay, the basic method is maintain your nose on the horizons if you want to. A more advanced pilot will actually pull in order to convert that energy into height. In other words, when there is a horizontal gust that comes onto your nose, giving you energy, that energy has to go either into kinetic energy, airspeed, the glider accelerates now, or potential energy, which is height. And you actually, when you feel a gust, when your seat of the pants kicks, you got to pull. You got to bounce off that bump and use it for potential energy. That's how the top pilots outclimb other people. Other people are just maintaining the nose on the horizon, not doing any dynamic soaring, whereas the top pilots, they're getting little jumps off of each little as if they were ski jumps. It's a little more advanced, but you'll learn that it's actually necessary to do that. Otherwise, your speed is going to oscillate too much.
Is that a pure elevator pull, or is that
elevator and rudder? Because remember, you know what a V-tail bonanza is like this, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the elevator and the rudder. If you are at 90 degrees, the rudder becomes the elevator, and the elevator becomes the rudder.
so elevator and a little opposite, right?
Just practice, and I'm not going to give you the theory. The point is that as the glider, you know, when the glider is horizontal, the elevator does this and the rudder does that. When the glider is like this, the elevator turns, the rudder raises and drops the nose.
Mhm.
When you're at 45, it's a combination of the two, which is why you got to practice.
Right. That's clear. Thanks.
Okay. And you got to practice with a goal of keeping the string upside. I didn't talk about that, but perfect coordination in a thermal does not mean the stick down the middle. It means, I said the stick. What do I mean? The yarn.
String. Yeah, yaw
Yes.
string.
The yaw string. Thank you. You don't want the yaw string actually in the middle. You want the yaw string up a little bit, which means a little bit of top rudder, opposite of just a little bit. I mean, it's complex. Depends on the gliders. I mean, you flying a 26-meter airplane, believe me, it feels like you're cross control all the time, and you got to enter thermals all kinds of weird ways when you got all that kind of wing. But that's why you got to practice at 45 degrees, you know, until you really practice at 45 degrees in thermals that are choppy in order to make you unstable. So you got to learn how to instinctively, what did Scott say? Relax and make turns on autopilot, because your focus is on the birds, on the cloud, on the other gliders, on where you're going next, on recentering the thermal. You don't have to, I mean, you need to be so instinctive on the complexity of flying a glider slow at 45 degrees worth of bank.
Hey, Fernando, is the yaw string a lagging instrument?
No, the yaw string is
Oh,
quite
come on.
instantaneous.
I'm joking. Come on.
It's not a
But
leading, it's not a leading instrument either.
Yeah, right.
the airspeed is also very fast, and that's the problem with the Var is a liar, because the Var is trying to combine an instant signal, i.e. speed, against a slow speed, which is change in altitude. The moment you hit a gust, the speed changes. But the glider doesn't start climbing on that gust for a while, and then after a few feet of change. So forget the value, learn the tonality of the sound. I fly exclusively on sound. I don't look at the needles at all. They confuse me. In fact, I put in a very slow winter mechanical because it's so slow that it acts to me as a variable, as an averager. And when I fly through the thermal, when I decide where to turn, then I look at it. It has a 3-second lag. A 5-second lag would even be better, because you would measure the entire thermal and tell me whether this thing is worth coming back for and turning or not. Okay, so, but the modern good Vario, especially a Clear Nav or a Cambridge, are phenomenal because the sound is so multidimensional. And it allows you to be looking outside, mapping the cloud, mapping where the core is, mapping this, mapping that. And once you experientially learn how to hear a Vario correlated to your seat of the pants and fly the airplane like you're in the zone, man. You got to be in the zone, and the zone is a linkage between what you hear and the seat of your pants.
Yeah. Fernando, yeah, I had one thing.
Yeah.
Just as a simple thing that's not quite so advanced, but a good clue as to whether you've got lift or a horizontal gust is this. If the variometer chirps, but you don't feel any lift underneath you, and the chirp is short-lived, it's a gust. If you feel lift underneath you, and the variometer is slowly increasing, it's lift. And it's a pretty reliable set of signals.
Yes. Yeah. The correlation between, because remember, the Clear Nav aerial is a brilliant, the Clear Nav improved it further, but it's a four-dimensional sound, okay? And when I mentioned this to LXNav, Tony Sebank, who's the president CEO of LXNav, I said, I don't like your Vario. You need to do, and I explained to him why, and now he's copied, and now the LXNav has this. But it's four-dimensional. The volume changes, higher and lower. The frequency of the bits changes. The pitch of the beeps change, and the tonality of the beeps, they go, they're changing in four dimensions of sound, indicating, rising at a rising rate, rising at a slowing rate, stable, but tending towards. It's amazing once you learn that, correlate to the seat of the pants and correlate to the other glider flying with you in the sky. Once you start pair flying, you really learn the shape of thermals. You really learn what you're doing right and wrong, because you got somebody right there beating you, and you see where they're climbing, where you're not. You see where you made the adjustment. You know where you got to make the adjustment, and you learn. So experientially, it's very important to fly opposite another gliders in the same thermal. I don't know how many hundreds, maybe thousands of hours I have thermaling with the Carls and the Chuck Bakers of the world and others, trying to see how to improve, playing with my flap settings to figure out which is best, etc. Okay, so keep the yaw string in the center with rudder. Very little aileron. In fact, ideally, you wouldn't move the aileron at all. Because what is an aileron? I've always said that. You all heard me. An aileron is a air brake on one side and a flap on the other. Why do you want to put drag on the wing? Why do you want to flip one little board up and one board down when you can just move the rudder and the glider, especially the way, Aventus 3 is designed a JS3 with the dihedral and the sweep back, that little wing lift and, the last 2-3 meters of wing is tilted up and back for a reason, because as soon as you move it forward, the air catches it. I mean, you're just dancing with the rudder. Okay. Now, it doesn't work quite so well in a bus like the K-21, but it works a whole lot better than trying to bank and unbank with aileron. Use a lot more rudder, and then learn that the aileron is a trim device. It's the opposite, because you're flying with very long wings, of traditional teaching, which says you bank with aileron and you trim with rudder. With this thing, it's just different. And trust me, I've flown 26-meter gliders in the Alps. And in fact, Jean-Marie Clement, when he was teaching me how to fly in the Alps, we had to practice 60-degree banks, which is very difficult without entering a spiral dive. And then he would say, Fernando, if you move the aileron, you will kill both of us. So we're in a thermal, we're flying strictly with rudder. As soon as if the thing started over-rolling, and this is a Nimbus 4, 26 meters, and it overrolls very easily. And I would try to pick up the dropping wing with the aileron, he would stop it. And it says, if you do that, you're going to kill both of us. Cannot move the aileron on a 26-meter glider. You fly with the rudder, and the aileron is a trim device. But I'm getting too far ahead of myself, too advanced.
Well, I'm sorry. Fernando.
Practice and feel the glider. Yeah.
What'd you say, Fernando? Did you say the 126? Is that what you said?
The 126. The 126 doesn't matter what you
No,
do,
I
Chip.
just
Just
checked. I
lean.
just wanted to make sure because it is
It
a,
doesn't-
it's an art to fly it. I just wanted to make sure
It
that
is
you
enough. Hey, Chip, you know how you fly the 126? You know better, but this is what I suspect you do. That's why you have the open canopy, the sport canopy. With the 126, you fly kind of like a paraglider. All you got to do is lean your head to the right, lean your head to the left, and that makes the plane.
You know what the
The
you know
weight
what
shifting device.
the Europeans call the 126 championship?
Uh,
The
what?
Special Olympics.
It is. All right. I'm going to move forward and wrap this. Parting thoughts. Okay. So, all these are just the three things. Remember to use every experience to exercise your four techniques. What are the four techniques? Your 45-degree bank, moving the glider around in that bank, maintaining control, going in and out of thermals, cloud mapping, and centering. But don't stay in the same thermal trying to stay up all day. Once your first thermal is the one you're going to get the feel for the glider at 45 degrees. Then come on down, do it again. And then, as Scott says, don't leave it until you're pretty convinced that there are other gliders in the sky that you can reach, and go over there, fly with them and learn, and go over here, fly. Get your three thermal sources. Eventually, you're going to start, doing cross country and learning how to climb from low, etc. But, don't stay at the top trying to stay up, because you are now good enough. Once you learn 45 degrees, flying the glider on autopilot and centering, you'll have enough confidence to do this, and then you're going to have enough confidence to do this. Those are my parting words. And it's all about experience. Experience is only gained when you push your envelope, meaning you do things to gain experience, not to stay up or to, da 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 da. You're going to have a lot more fun when you explore the envelope of the glider. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Scott, Fernando, thank you very much. A really enlightening program. Guys, we have time for a few questions.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Can I just throw out some parting
Yeah.
thoughts to the
Sure.
group? First of all, that was fascinating information from Fernando. Some of it was more advanced, okay, and that's where I want to kind of go with my parting comments. Guys, in aviation, whether it's jets, props, or no engine, training is kind of a crawl, walk, run affair. And that's just how we humans learn. It's true for more aspects than just aviation, but crawl, walk, run is what we do. And we have folks at different rungs of the skill ladder in this club, and that's a nice thing. And everybody's very supportive with folks on lower rungs of the ladder. Then compounding that, to put some context in what we're talking about tonight, we're all coming out of a pretty rough winter of general inactivity. The last time I climbed under a Q was early October. The last time I climbed in Blue Lift was late December, a month ago. So none of us are probably razor sharp at this point. But I just want to emphasize for training, and particularly for the brand new guys that are going to be scheduled for day one training in the weeks and months ahead, we will tailor flight training to you, okay? You're new to the glider, you're new to the environment out there with skydivers. We're going to keep things very simple with simple rules of thumb. None of the rules of aerodynamics and aircraft control are basically going to change for the level that we're going to be flying at. So you're not going to have to throw out any hard-earned or hard-learned lessons. It'll all work out just fine. And then people can gradually transition into more advanced techniques with mentors, et cetera, once we get the season underway. But fly often. I urge everybody to try to do that. We all need to fly more. We'd love to fly more. Look for opportunities to fly with Fernando or others. And we will really try to emphasize thermaling this spring for everybody. And I think we'll all come out ahead on that. But crawl, walk, run. The new guys, don't worry. We've got you in mind, and we've got a tailored program for you I think you'll like. And that's all I got.
Right, and I'll just
Right.
add that the coaching part of this program that we're talking about, the season isn't really quite underway enough to do any thermal coaching just yet, but it will, when it starts producing some thermals that we can really use,
Yeah.
we will be into it. So, you know, guys who want some extra help, speak up. And
Yeah.
yes, Fernando.
Uh, so the coaching program, which we keep alluding to, my main goal for helping MGSA in any way I can this year is going to be training or developing maybe two coaches that I've already spoken to, and they both agree to be the initial coaches. We can do that more. One is Harley and the other is Pat Jordan. The challenge is going to be using a medical model. Harley and I have talked a lot about it. Pat and I have not yet. But to develop diagnostic skills, first of all. We want the coaches to be able to ride, with somebody and observe them banking, entering, leaving, turning, etc. And then very profoundly trying to diagnose what's the one thing that it's like a golf coach, a swing coach. They watch you, they know they can't change your whole swing. I mean, my swing has so many defects. They pick the one thing that they think they're going to get immediate results and good feedback. So we're going to work very hard, Pat and Harley, who are very diagnostic people, and me being an engineer analytical, to understand what is the weakness, what is the best vector of change, number one. Number two, the real fun part is we're going to come up with exercises. We're going to come up with, Harley and I, for example, brainstormed that idea of flying right through the thermal. We brainstorm about the idea of flying really slow and actually getting to the edge of the envelope. We brainstormed that, so we're going to think about what is the experience. We want to give experience to the people. So we're going to diagnose your skills, and then we hope to give you experiential learning, not lecturing, experiential learning so that you learn for yourself. Now, it's very labor intensive. We got to cascade this, so maybe the three of us, maybe we add one more. I don't know. Those of you that are very good thermalists and think you have good diagnostic skills and want to participate, maybe we can have another. But I envision the coaches, the 3 or 4, 5 of us max, getting together and talking about how do you diagnose people when you fly with them and how do you come up with experiences for them. And then we'll volunteer to go ride with you because it's all going to be about riding and diagnosing and giving experience. Pat, would you like to comment since I mentioned you so many times? Jordan?
Yeah, I had just a few comments. First of all, for the new guys, we talk about this power plant. And Fernando, I love your idea about experiential learning. If you decide to go to the power plant and you've never been there before, and you don't really lock down your seatbelt and your shoulder harness, you will have an experience that you probably will not forget for quite a while. So that's a part of experiential learning. And my recommendation is, I would definitely go there at some point, but only after maybe you've mastered some of the other skills elsewhere, where now you're ready to get into a turbulent situation. The other thing is, and I know this is focused on a lot on thermaling, but one of the things that Mitch, who's been very quiet, probably one of our best thermaling pilots, he's coached me on a lot, is that when you're flying from A to B, you want to go up to Winder or go down to Madison, do not be in trail behind another glider because you're limiting what you can do in terms of sampling the airspace. And, I think Mitch has coached me on this more than once, where you need to spread out so you sample the air and you can basically help identify where the lift is. And Fernando, I'm really excited about this whole idea of coaching and observing and having the pilot talk about what they're doing and what they're seeing and not inundating them with a lot of information, because people can't listen and process and think about what they're doing if they're overloaded with it. So it's going to require the instructors to be very patient and try to keep their mouths closed. As you say, only speak when it's absolutely necessary. So I'm excited to get into the program.
And
That's,
one other thing
usually-
I'd like to mention, Fernando mentioned practicing the 50 to plus degree bank and slow it down until it won't go any slower. Please have quite a bit of altitude underneath you when you do this. You know, don't,
Yeah,
don't do it on a
There's-
1,500-foot day.
yeah. Well,
Unless you're really, really good or your life insurance is up to date.
Yeah, only
Yeah.
do that in duo to begin with. Do it in duo. Don't do it
Absolutely.
solo.
yeah. Yeah, the FARs require us to have a minimum altitude for stalls and slow flight, so we just need to be careful about where we do that. So there's actually FARs involved with that. And I'd just like to piggyback on what Pat said, and this is a reminder for all our instructors as we go into a new year. When the front seater is flying the glider, guys, we are often tempted to open up and talk a lot. And the brain does not process information well when we're flying, and we have a lot to say in the back seat. So we need to be concise, budget our comments to less critical phases of flight, and not overload the front seaters, because we can quickly overload them if we're not careful with information.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments? All right. In that case, thank everybody. Thank Fernando. Thank Scott for very valuable input. And we're looking forward to a year where we all improve. That's the whole name of the game. We all get better every year. And there's no limit to how much better we can get.
Thanks, Hartley and Fernando.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So-
fun.
So I'm going to shut off the recording at this point, and it'll be available sometime tomorrow because this is a long one and it takes a while to process. So thanks, everybody. Good evening.